Welcome to the LeaderCast podcast, a weekly deep dive into the stories that transformed our guests into leaders worth following. I'm your host, Joe Boyd. If you've been enjoying the podcast, thank you so much for being a listener. One simple thing you can do to help us out is give a review wherever you listen. Today's guest is Liotta. She is the founder and president of Sam Browne Healthcare Communications. She's got a real-life Jerry Maguire moment where she realized she wasn't doing what she needed to do and started her own thing. And she's been doing remote work with her team since 1999. You're going to want to hear some of those lessons she's learned. Liotta, welcome to the LeaderCast podcast. We are super excited to have you today. How are you?
I'm great. I'm thrilled to be here. I'm excited.
It's our first time meeting, so I'm super excited to get to know you a little bit. Could you just tell us a little bit about your elevator pitch of what you do these days, who you are and what you do, and then we'll kind of dive in and figure out how you got here.
Yes, great. So I am the founder and president of Sam Browne Inc. Healthcare Communications. We are a public relations and corporate communications agency for biotech and biopharmaceutical companies. So those drugs, before they're actually going off to big pharma, we work with those companies to help them communicate across all of their stakeholders, whether it's investors or doing deals or exciting investigators on studies. And so, we work in healthcare only, and it's just a great space to be in.
Great. I did read a little about the name of your company, so could you unpack that for me some?
Yes, everyone knows I'm a family mush. So, my grandfather, whose name was Sam Mastrangelo, it's my maiden name, was a famous guy in Atlantic City in the 20s. He had an orchestra. He was the sheriff of Atlantic City. And one day his name would not fit on the sign, Sam Mastrangelo Orchestra. So he changed his name to Sam Browne. And then everyone called him Sam Browne. And my dad, who I just adored, his name was Sam Browne, and their friends used to call me Brownie. So it was just such a special name to me that I named the agency after them in 1999 when I started it.
I love that. Now, I claim Vegas as my hometown. I was there for 10 years after college and still go back there a lot. But I'm imagining Atlantic City. Did you say in the 20s?
Yes.
I have interesting images.
Yes.
So this has nothing to do really with like leadership or your job, but do you have like memories of going to visit your grandpa in Atlantic City in the orchestra and all that kind of stuff?
You know what? We used to live in Atlantic City until I was 3, and my grandfather and my father owned these big apartments right on the boardwalk on Florida Avenue that eventually we were kind of run out of by whoever, because that turned to be Resorts International. They knocked our apartments down, made it into a parking lot. It became Playboy Casino first, and then eventually Resorts.
Wow.
So I do have a memory of walking right up onto the boardwalk, but I have 3 older sisters. They remember it much better than I do. But yes, Atlantic City was amazing back then, they say.
Yeah, it sounds very Rat Packy to me. But
yeah, exactly.
Okay, so and you grew up in New Jersey, correct?
I did.
Yeah.
Yes.
So when you were a kid, do you have early memories of kind of any ambitions or things that you were way into, or any stories that captivated you early on?
Yeah, I do. So I come from a family of teachers. My father was a math teacher. We all had him, very small town. And all 3 of my sisters were teachers. And for some reason, that just was not me. I always wanted to be a journalist, and I loved business. And as a kid, I always picture myself in a big New York City high-rise office doing business. So public relations was really good for me because it really is writing and, helping companies with business. So I think my path pretty early, and I got a degree in public relations. So I was lucky. I was fortunate.
Yeah, and lucky to, I personally knew my path very early and it ended up not being what I wanted to do. So you actually beat very few people out doing the podcast who like early on knew what they wanted to do and are still doing it. So where'd you go to school after high school?
I went to Glassboro State. It's now called Rowan.
Okay.
And they had an excellent program in public relations. I was able to do my first internship at Campbell Soup, which was amazing. And through this public relations program they had events to bring the students to agencies in Philadelphia. And I had my eye on this one public relations agency, and I went up to the guys at this luncheon and I said, I really want to work for you. I'll work for free. And they were like, okay, let's go. So I worked for them only 3 months, thankfully, because I could not afford my train ticket to even get there. But the college really set up a great program for me at the time. This is in the 80s. I'm old.
Sure. Join the club, sister. When this thinking about leadership and early on, usually for our first job or two, we have a prominent leader in our life that can sometimes be so because they're great or because they're not. When you think of maybe it's a mentor or just someone that shaped the way you would become, you would lead, any early
Yeah.
stories about folks that influenced you?
So I feel like I've had many through different parts. So I worked at a number of agencies in Philadelphia, and then I had this opportunity to go to the DuPont Merck pharmaceutical company in my 20s, and I worked really right for the CEO because it was a great size company early on, and I worked in HIV and alcoholism and these disease states that were so incredible, and so he was the kind of leader who would say, just go, take a chance. He didn't hold my age against me, and things like that. And so I think there definitely were people around my path who would say, if you have the confidence and are willing to take the risk, go for it. And at DuPont Merck, like one day I called Hillary Clinton's press secretary and said, I have this idea. And next thing you know, I'm bringing in my 20s, I'm bringing five pharmaceutical CEOs to the White House to talk about
Wow.
responsible keeping kids off drugs and alcohol and all just little things like that around my path that brought me to where I am today that I can just feel leadership mentors who were willing to take a chance on me, and that's really has impacted me.
Do you notice
And so
today that I assume you're in the opposite position today where you have folks in
yeah.
their 20s working for you? So do you think of that consciously as to kind of loosen the leash a little and let
I do.
yeah.
I do. I am always saying, think big, take chances. What can we try that's different? I mean, and I have clients who have that kind of vision too. So, to bring us to today, we have a client, a mid-sized biotech company called Biohaven, and we work with them on everything from corporate and investor materials all the way to helping them develop and eventually get approval on a migraine drug, and the CEO was like, I want Khloe Kardashian. Can you go get her? She has migraine, and she tried the drug. It changed her life. She loved it. Big thinkers like that are great clients. And I tell my team, be big thinkers because we're going to reach more people. We're going to have, families talking about migraine, talking to their doctors, getting more information. And healthcare is the greatest space to be in anyway. I could go on and on about that, but
Yeah.
information is power in healthcare. So doing public relations in healthcare has been great. So I have lots of exciting stories like that.
Yeah, and I know I can picture that commercial. I think it plays during a lot of
Yeah.
my sporting events,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is
Yeah. Yeah.
which is interesting because I think I don't know if a Kardashian in and of themselves would make me want to try a product, but the way you all set that up with it, it's a real life.
That's
It's someone you know, and I happen to have migraines too.
oh, do you?
And my celebrity endorsement deal is way cheaper if we want to talk.
Yeah.
It's mainly because
Yeah.
I'm not a celebrity.
Ask your
But
doctor about hair check.
yeah, but that I guess when you're promoting those sorts of things, authenticity obviously super important,
Absolutely.
and the way that you tell the story is what's going to engage folks.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then in terms of my own story at DuPont Merck, I left with a bunch of guys to start a biotech that we eventually sold. And then I went to a big pharma and I hated it. And so I had the flu one day and I was in bed and I was watching Oprah and she said, are you living your best life? And I was like, hell no. And I quit my job and I was making a lot of money and I quit my job in 1999. Yesterday was our 24-year anniversary. I quit my job and started Sam Brown and consciously made the decision that I was going to create a PR agency the way I felt the clients needed it and something that would work for the team. And so it was really different. We all worked from home across the country in 1999
Yeah.
before before video and before Zoom, and because I just wanted senior people, and I didn't want to get them just from Philadelphia, and I wanted everybody to be able to have a life, because just a short time in big corporate America, it's really difficult to be super successful and have a balance. And so my whole story is really about, giving up something that was great to take a risk to create something that I felt was going to be on my terms for what I see as success.
I love the Jerry Maguire moment where you're walking out with the goldfish. And
That's it.
uh, Oprah, I have an Oprah moment in my life too. She was
Yeah.
she was at a conference that I was at. I usually set up the story and say the best advice Oprah ever gave me, but there were 10,000 of us, but I was one of them. And she just talked about how after every interview, no matter who it is, whether they're like a president or a famous actor or just a regular person, that they always ask the same thing. And they basically always say, "How'd I do?" And she from that, she said, everybody just wants to be seen and heard.
Yes.
And that's just stayed with me almost every day of my life since she said that. And even as I do the podcast, trying to remember, like, we're just here to try to see each other and hear each other and see what can be learned from that. So this podcast is sponsored by Oprah today.
I had a full circle moment myself. Last year, I was on her "Live Your Best Life" class,
Oh,
and it was
cool.
about happiness. And so I was able to tell her my story
Yeah.
about how she changed my life and the business and all of that. And then even after, when it was over, she talked to me, like really talked to me, and asked questions, and about health. And it was all about, what do you do later in life in terms of happiness if you've put all of your happiness into your career and your profession? How do you sustain that when you start to change your life? Really interesting. So, yeah, I'm a huge fan.
Well, as an amateur interviewer, I feel like I need to camp out there for a second because there's probably people like, well, don't just say that, tell me. There's
Okay.
probably lots of
Yeah,
people
yeah,
listening that are in that exact stage. So
yeah.
what did we
So
learn?
the guest, his name is Arthur Brooks. He's a professor at Harvard, talks about happiness, and he has a book. I'm sorry I don't have it with me right now to remember the title, but and it's, he starts the book out by interviewing an astronaut whose entire identity and purpose and happiness was around being an astronaut. And you
Right.
could think that through an actor and, a business person, whatever. And so he says the true happiness is love. It and you can't, and it's what you've taken from that in terms of your whole life, and taking it to something else so you can sustain that level. So I'm probably not doing it justice,
No.
but in terms of my own story, that's how I try to live. I think everyone has a different bar for success. And for me, it has been, yeah, I want to be the best PR agency, but I want my team to thrive. I love my team. I want to be able to, have balance in my life and have a family, and it's hard for, anyone to have it all. You try to just have as much of both and
Right.
everything that you can to be happy. So there's just always I'm a sponge to all podcasts and positive energy, and those kinds of things to help you find what works for you, which
Yeah,
is
I love what you're saying. I think I've been leading LeaderCast for 2.5 years. It's a 20-some-year-old company, and I would have never thought that I had no ambition to lead a leadership company. I'm not sure I'm a very good leader sometimes. And just being aware, I think, of my own brokenness and some of my even insecurities as a leader, and then end up leading a company like this. But one of the things that I kind of wake up, and why I'm so grateful for the opportunity, I think, is so much we define great leadership as success. And usually success is determined by a title or a salary or being famous. But the very best leaders in all of our lives generally are not famous, and often they don't have the best titles. So I see this as just an opportunity to engage folks like you to let others know that oftentimes, maybe it sounds trite, it's one of those lessons that people tell you that you can't learn it until you get there, and it's often true that when you get what you want, what you think you want, you often realize you feel kind of empty. and there's a reflection back on that, right? And you realize, oh, maybe this isn't exactly what I was wanting or needing.
Well, there's always another level too,
Yeah.
right? So you're like, okay, I got this, and now what? And then now what? And now, so I think that you hit plateaus or something bad happens. I know that you ask like what happens in your career that really it's a pivotal moment, right? You
Yeah.
can go right or left, and what's the impact of that? And that's how you build great leaders because you I don't know if you're always born a great leader. I think at every turn,
Yeah.
you learn something really important, whether it's from a client or the team. I mean, my business is our product is the people. It's a service business, right? We're giving advice and creating materials and things like
Mm-hmm.
that, but we're not selling a particular product. So, um, leading the team is the only key to success because that is what you're offering to your client. So, but yeah, I think it's all so interesting.
Yeah.
For me, it was like leadership by fire and growth. You started. I was lucky when I started the agency. The big pharma I left gave us a big account, and I could immediately bring in some people. But it goes from like 3 people to 5 people to today we have 50.
Yeah.
So it's hard to look back and say at what point did this and that happen. But um, I think you just surround yourself with great people, and the truly good people do rise to the top and stay. My team has been with me a long time, some
Yeah.
20 years.
There's rarely a success story where there wasn't a very hard season, right? Like some time in the wilderness or in the cave is what sort of story theory people talk about. And we use the imagery of a dragon that you had to slay to get where you are. Uh,
Yeah.
does something easily come to mind? Just thinking about your business that you've built since '99, was there a
Yeah.
season, an event, something that had to be kind of dealt with or conquered, or a failure that had to be
Yeah.
overcome? Yeah.
Yeah, well, we had gotten that big pharma account that was setting us to grow, and we had it for 8 years, and it was a beautiful piece of business in oncology and everything. And then they decide they're going to a global huge agency. And so it was nothing that we did wrong. We could never compete with that. And it was devastating, right? But in
Yeah.
hindsight, it was the thing that made me realize that we are a much better fit for the small to mid-sized biopharmaceutical companies. We're never going to be that. And so you have to pick yourself up, right? And say, okay, what did I learn from that, and how am I going to get enough business to make up for it? And so, we had to go hit the pavement and
Yeah.
make sure that. But with smaller companies, we had to get 10 to match the budget of
Right.
that one. And so, but it was such a learning, and that's our success. Like today, we have 30 or 40 clients because we love those. We love
Yeah.
those, startup, cell and gene therapy companies that are going to have the future medicines that change the world. That's just a great place to be. So I did definitely learn a lot from that. There were also times where I went off to Tony Robbins. Like I'm a sponge, right?
Yeah.
So you say Oprah, and then you can say Tony Robbins, whatever. But I did the 3 day, and I definitely felt the business double when I got back because it just teaches you to focus. I felt for me
Yeah. Yeah.
appropriately on what we needed to do next, and that was very helpful.
I'm curious, when you lost your big account, did you have to downsize as part of that? And because you
No,
no.
I had a really great model of all consultants.
Okay.
So I could grow or shrink as much as I needed to. And I learned but then, and I always remind myself today is it just when things clear out, other things come.
Yeah.
And so we still hit it was a rough maybe time, but we still have always hit our kind of 20% growth mark every year. And I just think it just really always worked out. And it still does
Have
because
you
we've
stayed
always
with
had.
that model?
Yeah. No,
Okay.
well, no, about 2 years ago, I converted the model to a hybrid. So I have like 27 employees and 25 to 30 consultants.
Okay.
I love the flexibility of the consultants. I love working with consultants because they're entrepreneurs, have their own business,
Yep.
so that was always our model for years because everyone was working from home. So it was a much better model to have them have their own business.
Well, on the practical side, this is definitely something I wanted to ask you about. So it sounds like you were doing the COVID thing for a couple decades before COVID hit, running a remote business. So I would assume, well, all the rest of us were struggling to figure out how Zoom worked again. You were probably it probably wasn't that big a shift for you. But can you talk about how you what lessons you learned operating a remote team, and then
Yes.
maybe through COVID how that helped you or
Yeah, so we were really busy through COVID, which
yeah
was good because we were already set up for it. So it was definitely helpful that we had the model before then. I think there's definitely a bit of a leadership or agency management shift with remote that you need to think about. And that is, how do you motivate a team from independent locations to function as a full service agency and team? And we have always been like that. So
yeah
we may not have always been together in an office, but we were always, and we didn't have video. So we were always on the phone together. We tried to get together. You would go to your client's office and there were different teams and different geographies and things like that. So I think there definitely is something about leading a team that's not together. I bring them together somewhere fabulous like Mexico or a cruise or somewhere once
yeah
a year because that's really important. And I can do that because I didn't have a lot of overhead of office space and other things. So
right
I would the overhead money I would push back into good rates, good salaries, good bonuses, and an ability to do something really special every year. So going to that, I think you have to be really organized to work remote. You have to have set boundaries. If you're going to work from home and have children, you have to have childcare. I
right
mean, you
yeah
just can't do both. And there's flexibility, and our team, we always cover for each other when is needed and things like that. But there are definitely processes and things that have to be in place that I think a lot of people in COVID didn't quite realize. You can't really do the laundry and take care of your kids and
yeah
run a
oh and
a
you had
big
to yeah
pharmaceutical account.
and teach your kids like we were lucky our kids were like college age when the COVID hit because we
Yeah.
we barely survived them being little kids anyway like it's
Well,
just it's just hard
and
it's a hard season
so hard.
yeah
And during COVID, there were a lot of young moms on our team that the rest of us we stepped in for because you couldn't get childcare in,
yeah
right?
yeah
And so building a team that really builds up each other. And I think that that's important. Like we always have each other's back. I don't like to say just like that we're a family because I feel like it's kind of cliche, but at Sam Brown, we've really built something special in terms of working and building together over a long term, and that shows. And one thing I've always done that the team really values is I don't make decisions based on money. I've fired mean clients or fired
yeah
companies that just because the team is really the most important. And if you can't come to a place where everyone is doing really good work together from the client and the agency and it's super productive, it's not a good fit.
I'm curious because I think I tend to build a similar culture when I can but um ha, the old school advice is don't hire your friends, have clear like kind of lines of separation between because there's going to come a day where folks will have to leave and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah,
How
yeah.
do you manage?
Yeah.
And I think the family word is weird too. But how do you manage, say, a culture that values loving one another, getting to know each
Right.
other, with
Right.
the reality of business that sometimes people need to exit. It's not a fit. Have
Right.
any secrets for those of us that kind of lead that way when
So, I don't hire my friends. Of course, we
you
we
become
hire the
friends? Yeah.
professionals and you become
Right.
friends.
Right.
So, what are some of the tips? I do think that when you encourage an environment that's really supportive and you can work from home and all of that, it has to be overlaid with a very high bar. I set a very high bar for quality, service, cost effectiveness, delivering, what the client needs. And you can tell if you're not going to hit that bar if you take the working remote too far and things like that. So there have been situations where it just wasn't a good fit. Now with the consultant model, you can get a project and know right away and you're
Right.
not letting go an employee or something. So that's always been great, and I love working with consultants and then converting them to employees when they really hit the
Yeah.
mark. But
Right.
I think letting people go, you just have to be honest. And I could say in all of my experience, they know before it happens that it's not hitting the mark of the level of quality that we want to deliver to our clients.
Yeah.
So it's always hard and I hate it. But we have to run a business first.
Sure. And I think an old school sort of, I would say, the old way of thinking was kind of, we just build a brick wall, right? And we don't acknowledge that people have emotions and are relational creatures, and we can't, but that's not the way to lead anymore. So it does create, understanding that is a healthy thing, but it creates tensions sometimes, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, look, I really appreciate your time. Before we leave, I would love to hear let folks know how they can get in touch with you, or if they want to follow you, what should people do?
Yes, you can follow me on LinkedIn, of course, at Laura Liotta. And the agency's website is sambrown.com. And either of those. And, Sam Brown also has a LinkedIn page. So we would love to have you follow us and learn more about the agency.
Love it. And your favorite place to visit in New Jersey that people should know about?
I am currently in my favorite happy place, Avalon, New Jersey.
Okay.
Down South Jersey, for those of you who are not used to the Jersey Shore actually going all the way down.
So there's a vacation tip for you. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Great to meet you. I enjoyed this.
Thank you. Great to meet you too.
Bye, Joe.